I found a receipt. That's how it started. Not a lipstick stain. Not a whispering phone call. Not perfume that wasn't hers. Just a receipt. Tiffany and Company. $2,300. Paid in cash. And it wasn't from me. It was lying in the glove compartment of our car. The car I paid for. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for napkins. We'd just driven back from her mom's birthday dinner and she was inside taking off her makeup when I found it. At first, I thought maybe she'd bought something for me. Maybe a surprise for our anniversary? But then I remembered we weren't doing gifts this year. We were saving for a trip. That was the plan. That was our plan. So I waited. And when she came back out in her robe, smiling like everything was fine, I asked, calmly, "What's this?" Her face changed. Not panic. Not guilt. Just calculation. Like she was doing math in her head. "Oh," she said way too casually. "That's from a friend's birthday." I helped her pick something out. She paid cash, I just held the receipt. Bullshit. But I didn't say that. I just nodded. Let it slide. For the moment. Because I needed time to think. To watch. And that's when I saw it all differently. The new earrings she said she got on sale? They weren't. The sudden interest in work dinners? Always late, always vague. The locked phone? She used to leave it on the counter. Now it followed her everywhere. The first time I followed her, it felt wrong. Like I was betraying her by not trusting. But I kept telling myself trust is earned. And distrust is learned. She taught me this. She said she was meeting her coworker Jenna at a wine bar downtown. She lied. I watched her get out of her Uber in a tight black dress I'd never seen before. Hair done. Makeup flawless. That wasn't a just drinks look. And the man waiting for her? Mid-40s. Armani jacket. Rolex flashing. Gray at the temples, but sharp. Too polished to be a coworker. Too comfortable to be a stranger. He kissed her. Right there on the cheek. She laughed and touched his arm. They walked in together. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because part of me still didn't want to believe it. But I already knew. She wasn't stolen by love. She was bought. The next few weeks were a haze of forced smiles, polite nods, and pretending everything was fine while a storm brewed beneath my skin. I watched her carefully like a detective trailing a suspect, except this wasn't some stranger. I was watching the woman I married become someone I didn't recognize. She started dressing differently. Not slutty, not obvious, just sharper. Designer heels, luxury handbags I'd never seen her buy. Even her nails were suddenly always done, always perfect. And her excuses got smoother, too. Work meeting. Girls' night. Jenna needed to vent. The lies weren't sloppy, they were polished, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. So I dug. I went through our shared credit card statements. Nothing out of place. Of course not. Whoever he wasn't stupid. He didn't leave a trail on our cards. But then I noticed something strange. Her Venmo history was empty. Wiped clean. And she'd never done that before. I checked the jewelry drawer. A new Cartier bracelet, still in its box, tucked behind some scarves. I picked it up and my stomach turned. It still had the tag $6,800. She never mentioned it. Never wore it around me. Why hide something that expensive? I started to notice things she didn't even realize she was doing. The way she smiled at her phone. The way she typed with her screen tilted just out of my line of sight. The smell of expensive cologne clinging to her hair when she came home late. Not the kind I wore. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I'd lie in bed next to her, pretending to be asleep while she scrolled through her phone in the dark. She thought I didn't notice when she turned the screen brightness all the way down. She thought I didn't see the way her expression changed when a certain name popped up. I started to lose track of time. I'd show up to work late, make mistakes, forget meetings. My boss asked if everything was okay. I lied. Told him I was just tired. Which wasn't a lie, really. I was exhausted. Not from work, but from living in a house full of silence and secrets. One night, I finally snapped. I told her I missed her. That we hadn't been close lately. That I felt like she was slipping away from me. I said it gently, like a man still trying to save something. And do you know what she did? She laughed. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Just dismissively. Like I was being dramatic. Like I was imagining things. Oh my God, babe. You're being paranoid. Nothing's going on. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the more I tried to hold on, the clearer it became. Whatever we had was already gone. She'd left. Maybe not physically, not yet, but emotionally? She'd packed her bags a long time ago. And the worst part? She wasn't just cheating on me. She was trading up. I started parking 2 blocks away from our apartment when I got home from work. I didn't want her to hear the engine. I didn't want her to know I was home. It was pathetic, I know. Like I was a stranger spying on my own life, tiptoeing around the edges of something I used to belong to. One night I got home early. A meeting got canceled and I didn't text her, didn't call, just walked straight up to her door and listened. She was laughing. That soft, fake laugh she used when she was flirting. I could hear her heels click against the tile floor, pacing. Her voice low, sultry, not the tone she used with friends. She was on the phone. I stood there, outside, frozen, listening through the wood like it was the wall of a prison cell. I couldn't catch the words, just her tone. Soft. Intimate. Sweet in a way she hadn't been with me in months. When she hung up, I knocked. She opened the door with a forced smile, startled. "You're home early," she said, voice a little too high. I pretended I didn't hear the phone click off seconds before. I pretended a lot of things. That became my job. But that night, while she showered, I opened her laptop. She never cleared her browser history. There it was. Searches for luxury men's watches, how to invest a gift, discreet wealth management. A private Instagram account I didn't recognize, but her face was all over it, tagged in rooftop lounges, private dinners, luxury boutiques. All with the same man in the background. Never tagged. Always just out of frame. But he was there. Older. Taller. Impeccably dressed. I clicked through every photo like I was peeling my skin off. He wasn't just giving her money. He was giving her a new life. Private flights. Spa retreats. Jewelry I'd never seen. Dinners that cost more than our rent. She looked radiant in those pictures, alive in a way she hadn't been with me in years. And I hated how beautiful she looked. I hated that it wasn't me who made her glow like that. That night, she curled up next to me like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't living a second life just outside my reach. And as she dozed off, I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding, and realized something bone deep. She wasn't in love with him. She was addicted to the lifestyle. The money. The status. The power of being chosen by someone with a private driver and a penthouse suite. I wasn't poor, we had a comfortable life. But I wasn't that man. I couldn't offer her $8,000 handbags or champagne brunches in Aspen. And it turns out that was what she wanted more than loyalty. More than love. More than me. She didn't leave me for another heart. She left me for a wallet. There's a moment when pain stops being sharp and starts becoming something else entirely. It dulls, not because it fades, but because it settles deep in your bones like rot in old wood. That's what it felt like. I didn't feel shocked anymore. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt hollow. Like I'd been scooped out from the inside and was now just walking through the motions of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I stopped asking questions. I stopped pretending I didn't know. Instead, I started watching everything with cold detachment, like a scientist observing a slow-moving disaster. She came home later and later. She stopped making excuses. She didn't even bother hiding the lies anymore because I wasn't confronting her. And she mistook my silence for stupidity. That was the worst part, how easy it was for her to believe I was too dumb to figure it out. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings. She still texted me good night when she was staying out with friends. She still wore her ring, still posted the occasional anniversary throwback on Facebook just to keep up appearances. But her eyes were always somewhere else. Her mind was always somewhere richer. There were nights she didn't come home at all. The first time, she claimed her friend was drunk and needed her to stay over. I nodded. Said nothing. By the third time, she didn't even bother with a story. I just woke up to an empty side of the bed and the faint scent of perfume on the pillow that didn't belong to her usual bottle. I checked our shared location one night. She'd forgotten to turn it off. She was at the Langham Hotel downtown, 5 stars, rooftop bar, the kind of place you don't visit unless you're celebrating something or someone. I stared at the dot on the map for 2 hours. And I realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. Because she didn't care if I knew. She'd already emotionally divorced me, she was just waiting for the right time to walk away with the least amount of mess. Or maybe she was planning to keep me around as long as I was useful. A placeholder. A backup plan. A warm body and a shared lease. I was no longer her partner. I was her cover story. A lot of people think infidelity is all about sex. That's the part that gets headlines. But this wasn't about sex. This was about power. Leverage. Ambition. I was no longer what she wanted because what she wanted had changed. It wasn't connection. It wasn't history. It wasn't safety. It was luxury. And if you can be bought, then love was never part of the transaction to begin with. There comes a point where pretending becomes a full-time job. You wake up, brush your teeth, pour your coffee, and play your role like you're reading from a script you didn't write. That's what my life became, an endless performance in a play where everyone else seemed to know the ending but me. And no matter how hard I tried to claw my way back into the truth, it kept slipping further away, replaced by silence, avoidance, and an ever-growing distance between us. She stopped looking at me when we spoke. Eye contact became rare, and when it did happen, it was brief, strained, like she was afraid she'd slip and let something real show. Our conversations shrank to logistics, groceries, bills, weekend plans that she rarely kept. Her laughter disappeared from our kitchen. Her warmth vanished from our bed. And slowly, so did I. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. There were dark circles under my eyes. My shoulders slouched more. I smiled less. I had this constant ache in my chest, not sharp like a stab, but dull and suffocating, like I was living underwater. Friends started noticing. "You okay?" they'd ask. I'd nod, change the subject, pretend it was just stress. But the truth was I was unraveling. I started questioning everything, not just her, but me. Was I boring? Had I failed her? Was I not enough of a man to keep her satisfied? I found myself comparing myself to that man, the one in the background of those Instagram photos. The one with the expensive watch, the tailored suits, the confident smile of someone who's never been told no. I hated him, but I also envied him. Not because he had her, but because he had options. Power. The ability to buy attention, affection, admiration. Things I thought were earned, not purchased. One night, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom while she sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. I watched her for a long time, silently, and she didn't even notice. It was like I was invisible. Like I'd become furniture, present but irrelevant. I wanted to scream. To shake her. To ask, how did we get here? When did you stop loving me? When did you decide I was no longer enough? But I said nothing. Because I already knew the answers. It wasn't sudden. It didn't happen overnight. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Missed moments. Lingering glances elsewhere. The slow, steady erosion of trust, of intimacy, of loyalty. And I had been too blind or too hopeful to see it happening until it was far too late. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't bear the silence anymore. Because lying next to her felt colder than sleeping alone. And somewhere deep inside, I started to realize this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a contract. And I wasn't the partner. I was the placeholder. I don't know what finally broke me. It wasn't a scream or a slap or some cinematic discovery. No torn clothes or lipstick on a collar. No passionate confrontation. It was something far more mundane and somehow more brutal. I came home early again, a rare thing for me, and I walked in to find her standing in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, laughing on the phone. But this laugh, it wasn't the fake, flirty one she used with him. It wasn't the distant, cold one she used with me either. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in years. A real one. And it didn't belong to me anymore. She turned, saw me, and didn't even flinch. Didn't pause. She gave me a nod, a half smile, like I was a roommate she barely remembered existed. I walked past her, into the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed with my face in my hands. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't even beating faster. It was slow. Heavy. Tired. Because at that moment I finally accepted what I had been denying for months. She wasn't coming back. Not just from whoever he was. Not from whatever luxury world she was now playing in. She wasn't coming back to me. Not emotionally. Not spiritually. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't know, someone who smiled like she was winning a game I didn't realize we were playing. And the worst part? I had no idea who I was anymore. I used to be proud, confident, respected in my work, centered in my values. I used to believe in things: loyalty, commitment, trust. But this slow, creeping betrayal had eaten away at those beliefs. Bit by bit, lie by lie. And the version of myself that sat there in that bedroom was just a shadow of who I used to be. I knew what I had to do. Not in some grand, heroic sense. Not with vengeance or rage. But with clarity. Cold, sobering clarity. I couldn't fix her. I couldn't change her. And no amount of waiting or talking or loving would bring her back. Because she didn't want to come back. She was chasing something else. A lifestyle. A feeling. A validation I could never afford to give her. And I finally realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't even hurt, not in the same way. I was done. Not broken. Not bitter. Done. It's strange how quiet the mind becomes once the decision is made. No more questioning. No more analyzing. Just a kind of stillness, like a deep breath after holding it for too long. I stood up. Walked to the closet. pulled out a suitcase. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. The next morning, she barely looked up when I wheeled my suitcase through the living room. She was seated at the dining table, sipping her oat milk latte like always, flipping through her phone with those perfect nails that someone else probably paid for. The sunlight hit her cheekbones just right, still beautiful, still magnetic, still everything I once fell in love with. But all I could see now was the distance. The absence. The cold vacancy behind her eyes. She glanced up briefly. "Going somewhere?" she asked, not even pretending to sound surprised. I didn't answer right away. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene, the spotless kitchen, the vase of fresh flowers she didn't buy for me, the espresso machine I paid for but she used the most. Everything looked curated. Styled. Like a showroom. Not a home. "I'm leaving," I said finally, my voice calm. Too calm, maybe? "This isn't working anymore." She blinked, but not out of emotion. Just processing. Like I told her the dishwasher was broken. "I figured," she said, looking back down at her phone. That was it. No tears. No protests. No apologies. Not even a goodbye. And that told me everything I needed to know. I walked out of the apartment we'd lived in for 4 years, got in my car, and drove. No destination. Just movement. I passed the restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary. I passed the park where she used to make me promise we'd always take Sunday walks, even when we were old. I passed the life we were supposed to have. I didn't cry. The grief had passed through me already, like a slow, dull storm. What I felt now was release. Not freedom, not yet. But release. The kind you feel when you finally take off shoes that have been hurting for too long. The pain doesn't stop, but you can breathe again. I checked into a cheap motel just off the highway. 1 bed, bad lighting, and the faint smell of bleach in the sheets. But it was quiet. It was mine. I turned off my phone. Laid down. Stared at the ceiling. Let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. I hadn't felt this kind of silence in months. Not the awkward, avoidant silence of a dying marriage. But real silence. Clean. Honest. That night, I slept. Really slept. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't listening for her to come home. I wasn't waiting for lies. I wasn't trying to decode her tone or her texts. I was just alone. And for once, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like a beginning. Because not every ending needs a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it just takes one quiet moment of courage. And a door finally closing. The days that followed were both the hardest and the most liberating of my life. Every morning, I woke up alone in that dim motel room with a strange, quiet ache in my chest. Not pain, exactly. More like an echo, something that used to be loud and constant, now just a faint murmur. I didn't miss her, not really. I missed the version of her I thought I knew. The story I'd built in my head. The illusion of safety, of permanence, of loyalty. I wasn't mourning a person. I was mourning a lie. I spent hours just sitting in silence, letting myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for months. The shame. The confusion. The self-doubt. I had to face the fact that I had been played, not in the sense of being outwitted, but in the sense of being used. Like a safety net. Like a reliable second choice. She never left me for love. She left me because someone else could offer more. More glamour. More gifts. More glitter. And for someone like her, that was enough. One afternoon, I opened my laptop and started writing everything down. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to see it all on paper to make it real. The gaslighting, the slow withdrawal, the little lies that became a life. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That what happened happened. That my instincts weren't wrong. Writing it down was the first time I started to reclaim a piece of myself. She didn't reach out. Not once. No calls. No texts. No questions. I thought maybe she'd at least fake concern, put on one last performance, try to keep me in her orbit just in case she needed me again. But she didn't. And in some twisted way, that hurt more than anything else. Because it confirmed that I hadn't just been abandoned, I had been discarded. She didn't lose me. She let me go. But what she didn't know was that by letting me go, she gave me something I didn't realize I needed. Space. To think. To breathe. To rebuild. I started eating again. Slowly. I took long walks, letting my legs carry me farther each day. I read books I'd abandoned months ago. I called an old friend I hadn't spoken to since college and told him everything. And for the first time, I said the words out loud without choking on them. She cheated on me. And he didn't pity me. He didn't mock me. He just listened. And when I finished, he said something simple that stuck with me. She didn't deserve you. And deep down, she knew it. Maybe that's what scared her. Maybe being with someone who genuinely loved her meant she had to face parts of herself she didn't want to acknowledge. Maybe it was easier to escape into a fantasy where money bought affection and attention didn't require effort. I don't know. And I've stopped trying to figure it out. Because the more distance I put between me and her, the more I realize. She didn't break me. She just set me free. There were still nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, her name on the tip of my tongue. Traces of a life I no longer lived, ghost memories lingering like smoke in a room long after the fire's gone. I'd turn over in the unfamiliar motel bed, stare at the ceiling fan spinning in lazy circles, and remind myself she's not coming back. And I don't want her to. But healing isn't linear. It doesn't announce its arrival. It slips in, unnoticed at first, when you laugh a little too loud at a dumb show on TV, or when you catch yourself singing in the car without realizing it. It shows up in the way you stop checking your phone for messages that will never come. In the way you start caring about yourself again, not to win someone back, but just because you deserve it. I began to rebuild. Slowly. Not just my life, but my identity. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, modest, but mine. I bought second-hand furniture, unpacked my books, framed photos from before everything fell apart. I hung up a mirror in the hallway not to check how I looked, but to remind myself that I still existed. One afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend, someone who hadn't picked sides, someone who kept their distance out of discomfort. He told me she had moved in with the man. The one with the penthouse. It wasn't speculation. It was fact. She'd posted pictures again. Rooftop views. Spa weekends. New diamond earrings. Same woman, same story. Just a new wallet holding the leash. And that news? It didn't crush me. It didn't even sting. Because by then I had something she never truly did. Peace. Not comfort. Not wealth. Not some false sense of superiority. Just the quiet knowledge that I had chosen dignity. That I had walked away before I let betrayal define me. That I had survived it. And that survival wasn't weakness. It was strength. I started working out again. Not obsessively, but with intention. Each drop of sweat felt like I was purging the lies from my body. I kept writing 2 pages and pages of memories, confessions, pieces of the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Sometimes I cried while typing. Sometimes I laughed at how naive I had once been. But I never stopped. Because every word was a step away from her. I didn't date. Not yet. I wasn't ready to open those doors. But I smiled at people in coffee shops. I made eye contact again. I remembered what it felt like to exist in a world that wasn't centered around someone else's deception. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I started to believe something simple, powerful, terrifying. I could be okay. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday. It's strange, the moment you realize the pain no longer defines you. It doesn't vanish, it lingers in corners, shows up in dreams, catches in your throat when a certain song plays on the radio. But it stops controlling you. It becomes part of your story, not the whole of it. That's where I found myself, months after leaving her, standing on the balcony of my small apartment, sipping coffee as the sun rose over the city. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a high-rise. But it was mine. And that meant everything. I thought about her sometimes, not with longing, but with detachment. Like looking at a photograph from a different life. I'd remember her laugh, her perfume, the way she used to hold my hand like she meant it. And I'd wonder if any of it had been real. If the woman I loved had ever truly existed, or if she had always just been a reflection of what I wanted her to be. I'll never know. But I've made peace with that. One night, I got a message from her. Out of nowhere. No greeting. No apology. Just, hope you're doing well. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart calm, hand steady. A year ago, that message would have wrecked me. I would have read into every word, fantasized about reconciliation, let the wound bleed all over again. But now? Now I just smiled. I didn't reply. Not because I was bitter, but because I no longer needed to. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with resilience. I had faced the ugliest truths, sat in the silence, and chosen to rise. Not for anyone else. For me. That's the part they never tell you about betrayal, that if you survive it, truly survive it, you come out the other side sharper. Wiser. Stronger. Not harder. Not colder. Just clearer. You see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You protect your peace like it's sacred. And you learn that some losses are actually liberations in disguise. I started traveling. Took a solo trip to the Pacific coast. Walked on beaches I'd only seen in postcards. I breathed in salt air, listened to the ocean's honesty, and felt small in the best way possible. I watched sunsets without thinking about who I should be sharing them with. Because in those moments, I wasn't missing anything. I was complete. And now, when people ask what happened between us, I tell them the truth, but not the whole story. I don't need to smear her name or relive every betrayal. I just say, she chose a different path. And I chose myself. And that's enough. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It isn't exposing them or making them regret. It's walking away without looking back. It's becoming someone they can no longer reach. No longer hurt. No longer matter to. It's healing so well that even the deepest scars become maps of how far you've come. And I've come far. So far, in fact, I barely remember the man who used to beg for scraps of her love. Because now I know what I deserve. And it sure as hell isn't being bought.